Hey everyone, this is Gwen with Spartanburg County Public Libraries, and this is Nonfiction Narratives. Today I have as a special guest my supervisor, Andy Flint.
Hi there.
Thank you for coming, Andy.
Thank you for having me.
And this topic today is American presidents. We're looking at biographies and autobiographies of a Republican, a Democrat, and a non-party affiliated president. And we're going to start off with my man, Dwight D Eisenhower. You like Ike? I like Ike.
I like Ike.
Everybody likes Ike. We have Ike, an American Hero by Michael Korda. Okay. I read this book a few years ago and I really enjoyed it. And you just read it recently.
Yeah, and it's a great biography about Eisenhower. It covers his time as a kid and talks about the time that he spent with MacArthur. I didn't realize in the book that he spent almost 8 years as an aide to Douglas MacArthur, first in Washington and then the Philippines, and that molded him some good ways and in some bad ways to the commander and then the president that he became.
Yeah, he did speak, and you mentioned a little story about how when MacArthur was asked about Dwight D Eisenhower, he said, what was it?
He said he was the best clerk I ever had, which was typical MacArthur, belittling somebody else and at their expense, who was a great man in his own right.
Yeah, it kind of tells you just how much Ike put up with.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And he put up with a lot, not just with MacArthur, but with like the World War II when he was the Supreme Commander?
It was Supreme Commander of the Allied forces in Europe. He led Operation Torch. He had to deal with the French in North Africa. He had to deal with the Italians and their surrender in Italy. Then he took over D-Day and the European campaign. He had to deal with Patton and Montgomery, who couldn't stand each other. And he still had the meddling of Churchill and FDR. So it was crazy for him, but he kept an even keel and he smoothed everything over and led us on to victory.
Yeah, he kept, he showed a lot of grace when he was dealing with all that.
Yes, he did.
And it really makes me like him and appreciate him as a president and as a person. Yeah. And as a president, he's actually one of my favorites. I mean, he balanced the budget. He gave us the highway system. So I just kind of think of him as like the ultimate conservative president. Like he's the ideal. He's what I want.
Yeah, so, well, in any president, he was thoughtful and he could see ahead, and he tried to do the best by everybody that he was working with.
Yeah, so he's one of my favorites, and that book has just stuck with me over the years.
Okay.
So I'm glad you liked it.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I have.
Yeah. And our next book is Barack Obama's A Promised Land. So this is an autobiography written by Barack Obama. And I did not expect to love this book as much as I did. And part of the reason I loved it as much is because he so clearly loves America. Right. And he repeats that over and over about even when this country is hard to love, it's still good. And it just makes me feel good as an American.
Yeah, it does. It does. He was a good president, and time will tell how well he did. Yeah. But he tried. And like you said, you can feel that he loves America even with its rough spots.
Yeah. It sort of details his political career, his motivations for his decisions, and you get a very comprehensive behind-the-scenes look at some things.
Right.
He entered the Oval Office just as a stack of cards that was our economy collapsed. I graduated at that time. Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
And it goes through the sequence of events that was incredibly wild. I mean, he's got the Great Recession, the oil spill in the Gulf, the Affordable Care Act. He met Vladimir Putin, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. What else? Oh, yeah. It does end with a whammy that I'm going to spoil for everybody. We took out Bin Laden.
That was a great day.
That was a good moment.
I remember that moment. I woke up the kids and my wife to tell them about that. Shouldn't be happy about that, but
no, that's a good memory.
It was a good memory.
That's a good memory.
Yeah.
You get to relive it with Barack Obama. He does occasionally mention race and racism, and those were I mean, they're hard parts to read.
I'm sure.
But at some points, it kind of seems like he's trying to hold it back. Like he's kind of holding back, calling people out on stuff.
Mhm.
And that was a little more awkward than I was prepared for.
Right. Right. But it raises such an awkward conversation in
Yeah.
America, and it has been since the founding, and it will continue to be. Just trying to have conversations about it, and I think that people on both sides have to hold back. But
Yeah.
you go back to Ike, and you sort of just work through it,
Yeah.
and that's what we have to do. We have to do that as a country.
Yeah. It's important to be honest with each other at
Yeah.
least.
It is.
And like Ike, President Barack Obama had a lot on his plate and he handled it with grace.
Right.
All right. So
There's a non-political president,
There
or
is?
a non-politically affiliated president.
there is, he did get political. He did put up with some political shenanigans, largely from his cabinet.
Really?
Yes, but
Wow. Who was that?
last but not least, and certainly first in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen, we have the venerated Virginian, George Washington. Washington Alive by Ron Chernow. And this book is everything I love about biographies. It's just so juicy. It's got so many tidbits. And it'll make you appreciate just how lucky we are that George Washington was our president,
Yes.
our first president. He set the standard and he set the stage. And
Mhm.
so moving forward, we had someone good to look back on. It's like, oh,
He's always been a
Yeah.
great example in everything that he did.
yeah, we got lucky. The first guy to have the job did not want the job.
Those are the best people for the job most of the time.
He's not treated as a messianic figure in the book either. It takes a pretty honest look at his faults and his flaws.
Right.
He legally owned humans,
Mhm.
and he did not seem to understand why they didn't appreciate the situation,
Right.
which is a little bit baffling to see in this modern day and age. Like,
But that's today's day and age.
yeah,
And unfortunately, that's, it was the norm back then. It was not a great thing, but it was the norm. And we have to try to look at it through their eyes. And Ron Chernow does a great job. Is that Chernow or Chernow?
I've always pronounced it Chernow.
Chernow.
Oh.
Right, but he does a great job of bringing out those nuances, and he points out some of the ratings. I think over time, Washington did sort of bend.
He sort of seemed to accept that slavery would eventually end, but
Right.
he didn't take any steps to speed up that process.
Okay,
And I think that's always going to tarnish his legacy.
It-
So,
it will, but it will tarnish the first 15 presidents.
that's true.
So,
Yeah.
and it's just a part of our history,
Yeah.
and we've got to come to grips with that.
Mhm. Yeah, we do. He put up with a lot in his life. He had a narcissistic mother who never said anything good about him and once misspelled his name. That's a horrible thing to do.
That's a horrible thing to
Yeah.
do.
He had incompetent subordinates in the field during the
Oh, yeah.
Revolutionary War. Cough, Charles Lee, cough. His finances were never in order, and he
Mhm.
had vicious department heads who hated each other. And
Yes.
that drama is just delightful to read.
Well, at least they came together to form the country, but then
Yeah.
there was the ideas that they brought after the country was formed. And, we've been fighting those battles politically since George
Yeah.
Washington's time. I mean, George Washington instilled the tax and then led the army out to quell the rebellion because of the tax.
Yeah, we're still fighting some of these same arguments.
Yes.
200 how many years is it?
I don't know. I'm a librarian.
Yeah,
I
we
just
don't
read
do
all the
math.
time.
We don't do math here, but it's been 200 plus years later and we're still having the same conversations.
Exactly.
Yeah. But George Washington did go through it like all of our presidents. And for the most part, I feel like he handled it with grace and he set a standard of behavior for future presidents.
I agree.
He was devoutly religious, but he never used the Bible and he never flaunted his faith. There's actually a quote in here regarding religious freedom, and he said, "No man's sentiments are more opposed to any kind of restraint upon religious principles than mine are." And that's kind of hard to imagine where somebody will actually be faithful and be Christian and not, look at me, I'm holding a Bible.
Well, that's today's day and time
Yeah.
too. People are called to promote the word, and I'm more along the lines of what Washington did. No, don't show it, but live it.
Yeah. He did that for the most part as best he could.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. And when some of the people that he was working with, like Horatio Gates and Charles Lee, they would talk about him behind his back.
Mhm.
And he tried very hard to be polite and courteous to them.
Exactly.
And that's incredible. He did not make money from his time in office. He was never a rich man, and being president didn't help matters. It talks regularly about his financial state, and it was always a mess.
Mhm.
He did not profit from this country. And finally, I think the thing that impresses me most is that he had power and he really surrendered it.
Yes, that's always been impressive, and it's the cornerstone of our democracy. And he set that, and it was a wonderful example, and it applies even through today.
Yeah, and we got very fortunate with that. I mean, if you look at some of the other countries out there and their
Mhm.
fledgling democracies, and they got saddled with dictators and despots who don't want to give up power. And
That's right.
we were incredibly fortunate.
Mhm.
So thank you, George Washington. Appreciate you, man. So there you have it, everyone. That's our book talk on presidents. We've got Ike.
We like Ike.
We do like Ike. We have Barack Obama, A Promised Land. We have Washington Alive by Ron Chernow. You can find them all at Spartanburg Public Libraries. And Andy, thank you once again for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on.
Yep. And I'll see y'all later.
Bye.